Snake Eater is a very granular game, one that asks you to learn and adapt to systems and just be okay with the very specific logic of its universe. If you get shot, there's a chance you'll have to, on the fly, take the bullet out with a knife, apply disinfectant to the wound, and stitch it up, yet in the series you can survive nuclear blasts, crashes, and entire mag's worth of bullets. To be clear, I'm not trying to gesture at logical inconsistency here, as I think one of Hideo Kojima's best traits throughout the years is his willingness to commit to what he finds cool, the idiosyncratic ways his worlds work. His references in Death Stranding and the celebrity cameo of, well, himself in Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes, they don't point to a cynical ploy to get you to spend your money. They point instead to a geek who is clearly making exactly what they want to make. With him ousted from Konami in Metal Gear Survive following Metal Gear Solid 5, there was plenty of reason to doubt that Konami had the courage to make Snake Eater's remake as weird as the original game. For better and for worse, it's pretty much as faithful as you could want. However, we've been spoiled for choice recently, and I can't help but feel like starting on the third game, the earliest game chronologically, for a remaster could have given the grounds to try something new, to give a platform for the next generation of creatives to paint the world of Metal Gear with their own brush. I played Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater over the last week, and here's what happened when I did. Before I start, I've recently just hit 3,700 subscribers, and that feels incredible to say. I'd just like to say thank you, and if you want to see me get a little higher, I'd appreciate you subscribing. Before I get into the meat of the video, I'd like to clarify up front that Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater is a great way to play the game for the first time and get something akin to the original. It's near pitch perfect, with pretty much all of the strangest choices from the original kept in, and even most upgrades are both optional and in themselves quite intentionally clunky. I think that this is well tuned, and it's a remake that very clearly respects the source material. It looks great, and importantly, it sounds great too. Voice lines have been mostly kept untouched, except for those necessary to explain buttons, and though Snake Eater's infamous song was re-recorded, it hits just as hard. The ladder scene is just as impactful as you would expect, though perhaps I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. If you haven't played Metal Gear Solid 3, it tasks you as Snake to infiltrate Russia during the Cold War to rescue a scientist named Sokolov, a weapon inventor who defected to the US only to once again find himself working under Russia. He is reportedly developing a weapon that threatens to heat up the Cold War. On the off chance you somehow haven't played it yet, I'm going to leave spoiling the story. It's honestly an excellent one, well timed with plenty of great characters, and being the first in the timeline means you can technically start here should you want to. And for that, I would say it's a great remake. The story beats are the exact same with almost identical timing, and despite giving the option to try new controls, it doesn't feel intentionally more accessible. Parts you've struggled at before, you will likely struggle with now. It uses methodical and slow controls to stop you being a killing machine who can whip around corners mowing people down without a second thought. Snake Eater is unabashedly a stealth game. You can certainly decide to go loud and fire off that AK without a suppressor, but it all feels wrong when you do, and the game even slows you down as a result. You sometimes can't even go into certain cutscenes if you're being chased, and enemies do a lot of damage. Once shot, you have a chance of a bullet lodging in your side, and you have to go into a separate menu, carve it out with a knife, bandage up the wound, disinfect it, and stop the bleeding. When this could technically happen anytime you get shot, you start to really care if that next gunfight is really worth it. That Snake Eater part, other than parallels drawn to the forest swallowing up our main character, is also a reference to the survival adjacent mechanics of the game. Your max stamina bar correlates with your hunger, and you can hunt down rats, frogs, and, well, snakes in order to satisfy it. You can pick up rations and ramen, but where those stay good forever, the remains of animals you killed have an expiration date. The game is very good at reminding you how few resources you have and how alone you can feel. You have a radio attached to you that you can use to get advice at any time and get movie knowledge whenever you save. You are constantly having run-ins with a double agent, and yet the spy thriller nature of this story and the covert ops background paints a picture that you can't really rely on what's in front of you. This is all to say, after finishing Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, I was left with a familiar pit in my stomach. The sadness the game was over, the anticipation to replay the series, and the complications that come with reflecting on a game I was more familiar with as a kid. On its own, removed from that context, Delta is as evocative as you would think. It still hits incredibly hard over 2 decades later, and I frankly loved replaying it. The major difference outside of the graphics that you could feel in Delta is the new playstyle, moving from that sort of overhead view to an over-the-shoulder one. This makes the swap to first person for crawling, hiding, and shooting a little more natural, though it does feel very awkward in faster scenes near the end of the game. If you want the game to feel very classic, you can just pick the legacy mode and the legacy graphics filter, which gives it a green, kind of brown tint. Everything just feels a tad more saturated in this filter. I think what has made Metal Gear Solid as a franchise age so well is how weird, clunky, esoteric, and frankly brave it all is. The ways you can take out bosses, the fact that it's perfectly willing to just lose you if you can't work around a puzzle. It doesn't really care if you get lost, and this has always led to these water cooler moments where you can share tips on how to get through to the next area. And this is what strikes me as a bit strange about this all. It's all a bit safe for a game that has built itself on being different. And if Kojima were in control of this remake, it's hard to believe it wouldn't be messed with, that we wouldn't find new bits of story or funny side activities. And there is something new here. The Snake vs. Monkey mode, where a snake captures apes from Ape Escape, is a fairly fun mode. There's only a handful of small levels, and it will take maybe about an hour to get a decent time on all of them. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's honestly better for it. You just get plopped into a small space and have to look around in trees, on the ground, and in crevices for all the little apes. We also see the return of Guy's Savage mode, which wasn't in the remaster, but it's changed now. Rather than being activated by saving after the torture scene, you get it for beating the game, and it's a hack and slash mode where you take on a graveyard. I will say I appreciate the change from the source material here. I played through most of the game in the new playstyle mode and swapped over to Legacy mode for New Game Plus, and I do think that the new mode is worth trying. In turn, I think the Legacy filter removes some of the more natural lighting, makes everything a bit more contrasted, and though I think it emulates something less real, it actually may be a nicer way to play the game. This is sort of the depth of the difference between Delta and the original, and it's almost all optional. To draw a parallel to Kojima, Death Stranding Director's Cut didn't just add quality of life changes and update textures, it added new quests and different ways to traverse the environment. These actually, in a small way, changed part of how the game operates. It changes how you interact with it. I'm not just jumping to conclusions here. In a recent interview, Hideo Kojima said that watching Summer Games Fest, he felt like many big games followed similar systems and offered similar visuals. On the state of the broader industry, he argued, quote-unquote, it is important to put something really new in there for the industry, and even said in this interview that he wouldn't be playing the new Snake Eater. Now, he didn't elaborate on this or why he, quote-unquote, learned so many ways to kill people as well, so I'm not arguing he won't play it for this reason. It could be related to his own history with Konami, or perhaps indicative of the fact that he would prefer to play the original, or tons of other reasons. However, he sees a problem, one where trends instill and creatives are less willing to be creative. And looking at a game from 2003, bringing it forward to now, and making it the exact same feels like part of this trend to me. There is a way for a game like this to keep pushing the medium forward, to keep doing weird things. That perceived clunkiness, one I'd argue is perhaps better understood as intent, is part of what I'm saying here. I mostly use the phrase clunky for lack of a better word, and I think that term sometimes comes with the implication that the game is outdated or hasn't thought enough ahead. I don't think this is true now. I think games that opt for tank controls aren't doing so because they can't think of a better alternative. I think they are using a limited set of controls to tell a story in a specific way. But you see the edges of this in Delta Snake Eater, the points where it leans on the original almost to a fault. For instance, the loading screens are still placed in the same spot. These loading screens could likely be attributed to technical limitations at the time, especially some of the more overt examples around the second to last boss. So when Delta puts in those loading screens, it doesn't feel like an attempt to slow you down to tell a story, it feels like appeasement, for fear of an original fan being mad that Snake Eater doesn't feel the exact same. But ultimately, it doesn't and can't. It's a great approximation of a feeling, and it definitely grasps what makes the story work so well, but like revamping a 60s album in higher quality today, there's just a certain charm in the sounds of an old record player. I'd like to acknowledge before I get too much into this specific argumentation that Konami is in an unenviable situation. Kojima departing from the company, followed by the negative reception of Metal Gear Survive, has likely made those making decisions afraid to try something new. I think Metal Gear Survive is seen as a travesty, but it's not bad for trying something different or going off story. It's not great because it's not great. And I think that's an important distinction to make. I think there are a wide swathe of people who would find messing with the formula disrespectful to the intent of the original work, and I imagine that person may find even my argumentation here disrespectful as a result. But Kojima is an important figure in the history of gaming, and if there was some mid-20s Kojima type with a little too much confidence at Konami now, I'd love to think of that person taking big swings. Not everything Kojima touches has been gold, and this frankly adds to him as a character and the work of not only him, but the hundreds who have worked alongside him on all of his games. I bring up Kojima's points in the broader industry, not because I think they're right because Kojima is saying it, but because I think he could be right, and just happens to also be Hideo Kojima. You can still play Metal Gear Solid 3. In fact, it's easier to play it today than it ever has been, and I think the idea of being able to explore this world, once left practically dormant following Kojima's departure, to be an idea worth celebrating. If any attempts to bring Metal Gear into 2025 in the future is so beholden to what has previously happened, it won't be able to get out from Kojima's shadow. And it's not like Konami haven't done this prior. Silent Hill 2 Remake was wonderful. It added nuances to the world, it made some swings, added new endings, and even reshaped part of the fabric of the world of Silent Hill. It actively reformed the narrative and posited theories around intent, the world, and so much more. The changed camera angle was just the tip of the iceberg for the game, and in releasing, it also helped change the narrative around Bloober as a studio. I remember seeing quite a lot of cynicism coming up to the launch because many believed the team couldn't handle a story with this adult a theme or as subtly intricate. Importantly, I think that Silent Hill 2 Remake goes some way to change motivations. It makes James a tad more sympathetic in ways, and this is one that I think some could not like. But I think it's good to make decisions that people don't like. I think Kojima and the many teams he has worked on are sort of known for that. There's no objective truth to taste, there's no right or wrong. And every Kojima game of the last few decades plays with your perception of the game and the tech you use to play it. It plays you for shock value. I think like all great comedy and all great horror, there's an element of this that works so well because it betrays your expectations. The perception of what Kojima or his fans may want could pose to be a spectre that haunts these teams. It could take away their ability to provide that shock and to do something different. I would like to triply clarify here. I think the team working on Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater have made a great experience, but ultimately an incredibly familiar one. There are a few new elements of course, and I think the choice to add them is a good one. While playing, I kept thinking about this trend online. There's this thing that some short-form video artists do, where they pick a colour, show the audience, then blend paints to try and match it. This is an art form, and it's a skill. And it's not only impressive, but it's something I could never do. I admire the effort put in and the skill to do it so efficiently, yet I can't help but wonder what these artists could do with a greater canvas. Even with the exact same paint colours, I feel like there's a picture gone unpainted here in the wake of veneration. Thank you for watching my video on Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. I think I tried not to be too cynical or mean-spirited in this one. I do want to say it is a very good game, and it made me want to go back and replay the other games, which I think is really good for it. I think that a lot of people are going to be quite excited about this. I think a lot of people are going to be very happy, and my goal with this video is not to tell you why you shouldn't be having fun. It's instead just to say that I think this veneration held towards these games can maybe stop them as an art form, especially because a lot of these take place in a certain time, they were made on a certain console, and they benefit from the specifics of their textures, their techniques, even things like Silent Hill 2 having the fog because of computational limits, or there's plenty of places where this is the case, and I think it's okay for that to be why they exist. I think it's okay for something to be of its time. And I don't think that playing Metal Gear Solid 3 in 2025 feels outdated. I think it feels different in a lot of ways. And I think that game design has sort of an accepted art to some degree at points, like the button mapping on controllers. Like I think that teams feeling like they should be doing button mapping because that's what's accepted can hold teams back as well from doing something weird or different. And I guess I'm okay with relearning button schemes if it means that this art is more creative. And I guess that's the point I wanted to make here. I think it's out in a couple of days now. If you're seeing this after the game is out, let me know what you think. I think that people are going to be quite happy with it, but I do think some people might see what I'm saying here. I think that a new game shouldn't try and be a supplement for the old one. I think that it's okay to recommend that someone go to the original because it looks a certain way and feels a certain way. And I think Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 2 Remake existing at the same time is great. I think the fact that they offer somewhat different experiences, I think makes them both unique and both worth playing. Anyway, I've said all I want to say for now. I think I might adapt on this later, but yeah, those are my thoughts on Snake Eater. If you like them or like the video, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. I can't believe how fast things have been going. I would love to aim for 4,000 this year, but I don't think I'll make that an official goal because I guess I just feel lucky with what I have right now, and I'm happy to keep continuing on one person at a time. Anyway, thank you so much for watching my video.